Milton. You've just heard a good deal of Milton. Milton, Areopagitica, the summing up of his views on these things, is an odd ally for a free speecher. First of all, he doesn't allow it to a Roman Catholic. Absolutely out. And secondly, he's talking about the licensing of printers and publishers. And he's talking about the pre-publication censorship, essentially. And he's against that. But when it comes to post-publication censorship, he says, let the executioner and the bonfire do their work. He's not a friend to free speech in the way that we would recognize. And I hear Milton's name invoked a great deal in the debates about free speech. I hear Mill, the great opposition of ideas. If ideas are out there in a free space, nobody has anything to fear. Yes, if ideas are out there in a free space, but are they? It's a bold claim that this House believes that British politics is in the pocket of the media. A sinister one. None of us likes to think that. We like to think we live in a democracy. We like to think votes make a difference, or could make a difference. We think of the sort of mediocrity of Italy. I hope I'm not offending any Italian in the room, but it's certainly a British perception that is what has been happening in Italy over the last 10 or 15 years, the Berlusconi years. We don't like to think of Britain being like that at all. But I would say that we have been living through times when Britain is Berlusconiized. It is Berlusconi's Italy without the prostitutes, or at least we haven't heard about them yet. Now, if I'm right, how would we know? How would we know we lived in Berlusconi's Italy, as it were, Berlusconi Britain? How would we know? Well, I can tell you one thing you wouldn't do is you wouldn't find it in your newspapers. You wouldn't look for the confirmation in the paper. Rupert Murdoch, 45 years ago, gave a very interesting interview to the BBC in which he talked about newspaper power, and he talked about the power to generate ideas, to generate debate, to reveal and expose. But he also mentioned that newspapers had the power not to report, the power to hide. And he called this a great power for evil. And we see that at work now. If you want to know what this country is like, you're not going to read it in your newspapers. What do I mean by that? Well, think about the phone hacking scandal. A great scandal, yeah, exposed by The Guardian, a great newspaper. What did the other papers do? They tell you they have great powers of investigation. They tell you they hold power to account. You hear that all the time. They tell you they're raucous and troublemaking. Where the hell were they? They did nothing. Worse, they hid it. If you look at, for example, the coverage by the Daily Mirror in 4 years of phone hacking revelations in The Guardian. The Guardian in those 4 years runs 237 stories about phone hacking. What does the Mirror run? 11. 11 stories. And you know, most of those are this long, and most of them are pissing on the story. They are telling you it's a political fabrication, it's not true. Or else it's a little story about Andy Coulson being embarrassed. That's it. Okay. That's the Mirror, the deadliest rival, we're supposed to believe, of the Sun. That's a paper of the left, you're supposed to believe. Where were they? Not there. This is the great power of evil at work. Now, as I say, if the signs aren't in the papers, where are you going to see them? You're going to have to find the signs of this Berlusconiization in the outcomes, in what actually happens in the country. And we've heard mention already of Rupert Murdoch. Now, Rupert Murdoch, over 40 years, has barely known a government decision in this country to go against him. Anything that counted for his business went his way. I just ask you, is that an accident? This is the man, the swing vote in the newspaper market, the man whose son can vote, can back Labour, or it can back the Tories. It's the only big paper with that power. The Mail is wedded to the Tories to the death. The Mirror to Labour to the death. The Sun can go either way, and he has exploited that ruthlessly. You don't need to know the detail, really, of the unminuted private visits to Downing Street. You don't need to know the detail of Fred Michel's pathetic email blizzard on Jeremy Hunt and his office at DCMS, representing News Corporation. You don't need to know the details of the dinners at Chipping Norton or in Downing Street with Rebecca Brooks. You don't need to know all of that. You need to look at the big picture, the outcomes. The outcomes tell you he's getting what he wants all of the time. It took practically a revolution to prevent him getting Sky, the whole of Sky, as he wished last year. So outcomes. A quick one. Motorman. You may know about this, you may not. A private investigator who worked for 14 national newspapers conducting illegal searches on behalf of 305 listed journalists. This was exposed by the Information Commissioner. What happened? Nothing. Nothing at all. No journalist was prosecuted. Why not? Because the law, essentially, the Information Commission's officers didn't have the resources to take on national newspapers, and the penalties weren't worth it. They would have been paid out of petty cash. Fines. Nobody would have cared. So he didn't prosecute. What did he do? He tried to stir up some action to prevent this happening again. He tried, for example, to persuade the government to impose more serious penalties so it would be stopped. What happened? Representatives of 3 national newspapers went to see Gordon Brown, and they said, no, we must not have journalists being locked up for this sort of offence. We must not have it. No argument, no justification. Paul Dacre said in public that he, the editor of the Mail, that he thought it would make this the only country in the world where they lock up journalists. This is a crime. It's not journalism, it's a crime. But what happened? No, there is no penalty. We are in a position now where the door is wide open to journalists to do this stuff, to recruit private investigators to do it. If it were not for the shadow of Leveson, they'd all be at it right now. And we're not talking about celebrities. We're talking about a huge variety of people in all walks of life, including families of, for example, the Soham victims. We're talking about a hearing aid consultant who had a fashionable or famous client. His private details being illegally acquired using illegal access to databases. Look at the law of contempt. Contempt of court is 1984 Contempt of Court Act. Every journalist has it beaten into them, okay? It's part of the drill. It's there to protect defendants who face trial and who are undergoing trial. The drill is that you don't talk about the detail of criminal cases while proceedings are active. Words every journalist knows. Year after year after year after year, newspapers ignored it. They ignored it. I have a little list. In the case of Colin Stagg, in the case of Barry George, the man convicted of murdering Jill Dando, in the case of the Ipswich rapist and another man who was accused before him, in the case of Karen Matthews, you may remember the unfortunate case in the north of England. The list is very long. These are spectacular cases in which the newspapers go to town. They demonize the suspect. They make hay. There is actually a law against this. But did any government enforce it? No. They wouldn't. Attorney General after Attorney General refused to act against newspapers. Actual journalists were begging them to do it. Enforce the law. No. They wouldn't. Now, you look at the outcomes. I don't need to tell you about hacking. Hacking was a crime. It would be lovely to say that the fact that it's a crime means that it wouldn't happen. But it did. Ask yourself why. What was the outcome there? The outcome was they hacked and hacked and hacked and hacked and hacked. Nobody stopped them. When they were caught, only one journalist was prosecuted. And for 4 years, the News of the World told us that there was only one rogue reporter. Well, we know better. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that the press has the politicians in this country in its pocket. We have a moment coming when Lord Justice Leveson reports, when we can stand up and say, and here is another secret that the press won't tell you, the polls say something like 80% of the population favors regulation of the press that is independent of both government and the press, that is backed by statutes so it makes a difference. The press won't tell you that most of the country wants it. They will fight it tooth and nail. We have a chance to make it happen. We should all stand up and make sure that the editors and proprietors don't get away with it again. Thank you very much.